1,491 miles or 2,399 kilometers from Cape Town, South Africa, lies the world's most remotely inhabited island. This small island in the absolute middle of the Atlantic Ocean is only accessible by an 8-day-long boat trip that departs from Cape Town and makes its way to Tristan de Cunha just 9 times a year. With just one island store, a single post office, one cafe, one pub, one very small school, 11 different guest houses available to stay at, and 120 private homes that house the island's 268 residents, it is truly hard to believe that people actually live on this extremely remote island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The island was discovered in 1506 by a Portuguese admiral. The Portuguese attempted to build settlements on the land in both the 17th century and also in 1810, but were unsuccessful. Finally, in 1816, a group of 20 military men from Great Britain were able to build a settlement on Tristan de Cunha. Living so isolated from the rest of the world in a rather extreme climate proved to be very difficult for these men, so less than a year after the settlement was officially formed, the British military withdrew its troops from the island, leaving just 3 brave soldiers who refused to leave. These soldiers figured out ways to survive on the island and were eventually joined by shipwrecked sailors that would stumble upon the rock in the middle of the Atlantic. Eventually, by 1886, the island had transformed from 3 brave men into 97 inhabitants, comprised mostly of lost sailors. This is also the time when the island got its official name, Edinburg of the Seven Seas. Things were going well for the residents of the island until 1961, where an eruption of the island's volcano threatened the settlement, forcing all 198 residents to evacuate to England. 2 years later, the volcano subsided and all 198 residents moved back onto the island. It was then the island started booming. A new harbor was built in 1965, allowing fishing boats to come in and out easier. Roads were being established across the town, a hospital was built, and electricity, water, and sewage facilities were constructed at this time. Tristan de Cunha was seeing tremendous growth. That was until 2001. On Monday, May 21st, 2001, it was a murky morning, overcast, and raining with a stiff breeze. Work had begun normally on the island, but at 9 a.m., the seas became a whirlwind of white water, with heavy winds coming out of the southeast. By 11 a.m., the storm evolved into nothing ever seen before on the island, where all the workers were instructed by the leaders on the island to stop working and head home immediately. The wind became stronger and stronger, eventually ripping many of the roofs off the buildings. By noon, residents were seen running from one building to another, seeking shelter, and doing anything they could to prevent the doors and roofs from being blown away by the wind. By 12:30 p.m., all men were told to report to the hospital to salvage the hospital equipment and try and prevent any more destruction to the building. The storm continued to ravish for an entire day, causing tremendous damage to the majority of the buildings on the island. That night, the inhabitants of Edinburg sheltered together nervously, with the only light being provided by candles, and with their feet sitting inches deep in muddy water. The day after the storm, despite some wind and rain persisting, the residents worked non-stop to repair the homes of the buildings that were destroyed from the storm. And although the island hasn't seen a storm of this magnitude since 2001, Edinburg still receives a good deal of tropical storms. Today, the island of Tristan de Cunha has 245 residents, which is down from its population of 264 in 2010. Much of this decrease in population is due to rising prices and the harsh storms that provide a relatively tough way of living. Tristan de Cunha does receive a few tourists each year, mainly coming from cruise ship excursions. The water gets pretty shallow close to land, so the ships have to dock about a mile from land and then allow smaller boats to transport the supplies and people onto the land. This can be tricky with how rough the waters are in the southern Atlantic, and because of this, there are only roughly 60 days a year where the small boats can make their way onto the island, where they would rest on the dock made up of volcanic rock. Once on the island, there are 11 guest homes to stay at. These guest homes go for £25 a night or $30 US. The owners of the home are very clear that 75% of the charge is paid to the island family and 25% goes to the government. The island does feature an exclusive guest house called the Traditional Thatched House Museum, which has a beautiful blue door, plenty of land, and you can enjoy lunches brought straight to you at the house by the locals on the island. This home is a little more expensive, costing £100 or $121 US a night. The island is known for their extremely generous hospitality. However, they don't just want anybody coming onto the island for any wrong reasons. Once potential visitors have an idea as to when they would like to visit, they have to email the secretary of the island and provide reasons for their visit and what they hope to do while on the island. The secretary can either approve or disapprove the potential visitor. Along with the secretary, there are 11 other members that make up the island's government. The leader of the island is known as the resident administrator and is appointed by the governor of St. Helena, another British island in the Atlantic Ocean up to the north. Below the administrator, there is the Island Council, which is composed of 8 elected members and 3 appointed members. Of these 11 council members, at least 1 is required to be a woman. There is 1 full-time police officer and 3 constables, which is basically a word for a peace officer. However, these officers don't typically have to enforce the laws too often, as Tristan de Cunha is known as an extremely safe place. Residents say they can allow their children to run around freely on the island without any supervision, and when the residents are out at work on their potato farms, they typically leave their doors unlocked and windows wide open. The residents all refer to each other as brothers and sisters, acting like one big family. The residents' main source of income is potato farming. The potato farms are about a mile from the town where everyone lives. The residents' way of getting to and from the potato farm is by a free bus, which drives on the only road in the entire island. Land for farming never goes up for sale because every family is given a few fields in the potato patch where they are allowed to grow their crops. Houses also never go up for sale as homes are just passed down from generation to generation. Also on the family's land, each home is allowed to own 2 cows, which is regulated by the island's government to avoid overgrazing. Other animals that are common on the island include rockhopper penguins, rare bird breeds, and, unfortunately, mice and rats, which were brought over on the same boats that helped populate the island in the 19th and 20th centuries. The rats and mice pose such a problem that the islanders have created an entire holiday dedicated towards getting rid of the rats, which is known as Ratting Day. On this holiday, men will team up and compete to see who can catch the most and the biggest rats and mice. Judges will count the tails of the rats, and then the awards are presented back at the town's Prince Philip Hall for a dance-filled celebration. Here at Prince Philip Hall is where the island's only bar resides, which is known as Albatross Bar. The bar is very cheap, just £1 or $1.22 in US dollars for a drink, and always has the nicest locals. Aside from cheap drinks, the locals can get their food at the Tristan's Island store. There is not much advertising for this store other than the supermarket sign out front, but inside you can find essential products and supplements that are often locally produced. Other goods need to be ordered months in advance of the arrival of incoming ships, given that there are very few ships that make their way onto the island. You won't be able to find any internet connection on the island other than at the island's internet cafe, which is on the first floor of the government building. The internet is said to be extremely slow, however, loading just 200 kilobytes per second, which probably wouldn't be even fast enough to load this video. Although residents and especially children aren't attached to the internet like we are here in my home country of the United States. Must be refreshing. At the end of the day, it is truly hard to conceptualize how different life would be here on the world's most remote island. The island has surely had its fair share of trials, but the kind residents of Edinburg continue to live and prosper in their everyday lives. Do you think you could live here?